Now, the purpose of the business blueprint phase is to define the target state of the solution. For each project that you have created, you have the possibility to define a business process structure. This enables the blueprinting, configuration, testing and training activities to be linked directly to business scenarios, business processes or process steps. To support the definition of the business process structure, now in addition to defining the business process structure, it's also possible to define which master data objects and organizational units as well as interfaces are to be used for a scenario or process. Once the structure is created, it is possible to define specific project management information. For example, who is required to define the business blueprint for a given business process, process step or business scenario. And it's also possible to give planned data. Next, it is possible to define it's possible to define business blueprint data. For example, it is possible to define project documentation, for example, requirements documents, business process procedures or functional specifications, and it's also possible to define the organizational impacts. You need to define system data as well. For example, which transaction codes are going to be used to execute a specific process or business scenario. So we're just going to go into the system again. There are two things we wanted to show first of all. Now, using a project, a different project, this one here, there are different ways to create your process structure. Now, like I said before, for each project within Solution Manager, you are able to define the business scenarios, which will be supported by the project, as well as the business processes, which are supported by the process, and process steps, which are supported by the process. Now, to define these business scenarios, you can use three different methods. The methods which are available to you, firstly, is you can select a business scenario from the SAP Business Process Repository. Within the Business Process Repository, you have standard SAP business blueprint information and configuration information available. This is an accelerator for you. You can also take a scenario structure directly from your solution database. Now, after an implementation project or any other project has been completed, you can transfer the information from the project into the solution directory. This allows you in the future then to take this information from the solution directory and copy it into a project. Or the other option is you can create the structure from a different project that you have within your project repository. So in this example, this is from the SAP Business Process Repository, and when you do this, the system will automatically pre-fill specific information from the repository. For example, it will fill in any transaction codes which are defined in the repository, and it will also fill in any general documentation or project documentation which is defined as an accelerator. But I wanted to show you how to make this on your own. Now, to create the scenarios yourself, you can actually see these are our own standard scenarios. This is not a standard SAP. And quite simply, to create the scenario, we'll just give the scenario a name. And when you save the scenario, it then creates a hierarchy for the business processes. And again, for each one of your business processes, you're able to define the process name. You can again copy this in from a given project. from your solution database, or so forth. Now, once your structure is defined, in the project administration area, you're able to lock the structure to ensure that nobody can change these elements. Depending on the way in which you want to manage your process, once all of the scenarios are defined in the structure, you're able to create specific project management information. For example, you are able to define who is responsible for the process, who needs to create all of the blueprinting information, for example. You can define when you want this to start, when you want it to finish, how many man days this is going to take. Once you have done this, let me just put a bit of data in here quickly. Once you have done this, it's possible to create a work list for the user so they know how many days they've still got to work on this. And quite simply, this can be done either using the project analysis tool, or it can be done by looking at your work lists. Okay, so in addition to this, you have the ability to define documentation for a given process. We'll just look at an example that we have. So it's possible to define documentation on multiple different levels. For example, you can define project documentation on a business scenario level. In some companies, you may document your scenarios in a Visio document, or you can also define documentation on a business process or process step level. So, for example, what you can see on the screen is a document from Microsoft Visio that is which describes the scenario for this project. Now, this enables you then to have a very transparent view on the documentation that's being created. You can step through all of your documentation. You can have different documentation types. For example, you may have user requirements or business process procedures or design specifications. And it is extremely flexible to create documentations quite simply. Now, in addition to creating all of the project documentation, you have the ability to define specific transaction codes that need to be completed when using this in the productive system. Within the sales order processing area for our solution, we use transaction VAO1 as a standard transaction. We have other transactions for the possibility to change a sales order, or VAO3 to display the sales order. Now, you can only add transaction codes which are present in your logical system. So you can't make the transaction codes up, obviously. If you have developed a new transaction code in your ERP system, you can list this in here as long as it's there within the system.